Okay, well, today we're going to do one on Rahotep and Nofret. These are very important people and nobility in the earliest of dynasties, like the fourth dynasty, whenever the pyramids were being built. In fact, Rahotep means satisfied in God Ra. He was a prince, the son of a pharaoh. Which pharaoh? Well, Sneferu. And his mom was his first wife, Hetepheres. And I'll show you here where it actually explains that she's shown on the tomb walls with blonde hair. And in ancient Egypt, during the fourth dynasty again, so the time of the pyramids, during the reign of his father Sneferu, possibly his brother Khufu too. So a lot of times I'll just show you a picture of this guy and marvel over his crystal blue eyes and so on, and show you as an example of how there's red ochre males and pale females. And that's the same symbolically drawn artwork. It's been done for thousands of years. And it can be seen in the Minoans, the ancient Etruscans. It can be seen in Sumeria, in ancient Persia, in Mediterranean people, in areas of the Levant, in ancient Anatolia, and Greek's art of the period. And no one's confused about any of these people, including the Caucasian Egyptians, that have been well documented. But a lot of things aren't known about the Egyptians. Sometimes whenever I show these blue eyes, people go like, well, that wasn't real popular, was it? And of course, usually right about that time in my video, I'll show about 6 or 8 of them in a row and go, no, it looks like it's pretty popular. And if you look up the genetics of ancient Egyptians that they've found and been able to get now, it actually shows that this was pretty common. Not all common, because there were Mediterranean people and ancient North African people that were hooked up with these other people that had come, apparently, like it says in the King Tut article, from up in Anatolia area, Caucasus Mountain region, and so on, about 9,500 years. And they are the ones that are deemed to have brought agriculture into Egypt, a different form of it where it could really be utilized. And they made all types of canals that run off of the ancient Nile. Nilus, by the way, is a Greek water god. The river was actually called the River R. But Nilus is a Greek water god, and so that's where they get the idea of the Nile from, just like the word Egypt, because they refer to it as Kemet, and that refers to the dark alluvial soil that enabled them to have advanced agriculture and really kick off the civilization and made it prosper for many thousands of years. You see, the Nile runs from runoff from the Ethiopian mountains, or an area that we would call Ethiopia, although the Ethiopians of the Greeks that coined the word were a Caucasian people living at the far east and the far west of the known world, where they said that the sun rose and set. And back then they would see sunsets and sunrises, and it looks a little bigger than at full moon. And they actually had a belief at one time, before science really kicked in, that it was closer to those people. Of course, whenever they actually went to far northwest Africa looking for these sunburnt faced people, because they were so close to the sun setting and rising, all they found were pale Caucasians. So a new term was coined called Leucoethiops. You can look it up, even in Wiki, even though they act a little ambiguous about it. And they go on this long tirade that's pages long But in reality, what they were looking at was people that weren't sunburned faces, but also when they got there, they realized that the sun still looked like it set far off in the distance, but it was still big too, and they couldn't quite figure it out. Well, now we know that, of course, the world is round and so on, and I made a recent video about how even the Greeks and a lot of other people in Alexandria had already figured it out, but actually it dates back before that. It's real simple. Whenever you see an eclipse and the thing that starts to shadow in front of the moon is actually a circular object, it's pretty easy to tell that, well, we're on a ball. And of course, now that we've taken a good look at all the planets and things, we pretty much realize that we're on a ball just like those. In fact, I made a recent video showing the size and the shape of the Earth and how they knew it well back when. It wasn't in the time of Copernicus and so on, like they try to tell you in school. You get deeper into it and you find out that Eratosthenes had already figured it out, along with Aristotle and others. But Eratosthenes had somebody walk all the way up to Syene from Alexandria and verify that this well that they had there that was dug straight vertically into the ground, it didn't show a shadow at all on the longest day of the year. And so he walked all the way up there, which was some 800 miles, and then he walked all the way back and counted it again. And of course, this was a way to verify it. And the numbers were so close together, they realized that that's probably what it is. And then he plumbed, totally vertical, a post or something that you would think of like a monolith. And lo and behold, it did show on the longest day of the year an actual shadow. Not too much of a shadow, but about 8 degrees or something. And so he mathematically figured out the idea. Imagine this brilliant concept. If we were on a ball and up in Syene it was no shadow and there was a shadow here about 8 degrees versus what a 365 degree ball would have onto it, that actually gives you an idea of how the size of the Earth actually is. But more amazing than that, in that video I explained and showed that the Great Pyramid, and I showed it in an older video where Randall Carlson goes into it, and up until modern day satellites, that's the most accurate measurement of the Great Pyramid, and the most accurate measurement of the size of the Earth until we actually had satellites. It's not off by much at all either. In fact, if you find the bulge of the Earth from the tides and so on there, it's well within the margins. But that's neither here nor there. Let's get back to Rahotep and his wife Nofret. See, because he's a prince of Egypt. He was the son of Pharaoh Sneferu, as I said, and his first wife Hetepheres. And of course he's during the reign of his father Sneferu, who is possibly the brother of Khufu also. Cheops, the one the Great Pyramid's made out of, or made it for. And was found into a burial at Mastaba in Maidum called M6. And Nofret again was his spouse. And he has a bunch of brothers and sisters and so on too. But there's a lot of information on him. And here you can see a picture of the sacrifice chamber and the width with her children. And all these names that are put down just below that, they're showing you family. In fact, there's another depiction of Rahotep and Nofret, just like common Egyptian artwork was at the time, at an offering table that is in Mastaba M6. As a member of the royal family, he was entrusted with a number of important functions in the administration of the state, and its historical importance derives from the knowledge gained from the exploration of his tomb, number 6 in my doom, as I said, and near the pyramid of Sneferu. Rahotep was surely enough of an influential magnet, and we consider it to be the time of intensive pyramid building, especially in Dashur, because that's where the first ones were built, and then it changed places and they built the Great Pyramids after that, as to which required the necessity and logistical base of all the works, the organization of the construction itself, and the provisions of the necessary manpower, and this Rahotep had something to do with that. As all princes were always given real cush jobs and important jobs, especially if they were intelligent enough to stand out. In fact, I'm about to do another video on the architect of the Great Pyramid. And if you haven't seen him before, it's going to kind of blow your mind. But his name is Symbolism. Back to him, though. So, social structures for artisans and their families were built around large buildings, and a lot of those were mastabas, which are the same type of burial buildings and things that are found in ancient Sumeria. And these were other findings as they later developed in Giza during the reign of Rahotep's brother Cheops. So not only was he the son of that one pharaoh, he ended up being the brother of Khufu, Cheops, as evidenced by the archaeological findings at Height El Ghurab. Rahotep took part in these works with the title of Head of Construction Supervisor. Albeit within the scope of his provincial powers, his affiliation with the royal family was emphasized by a series of titles which were both symbolic and or religious, and titles expressing his active competence. Now, the tomb was uncovered by Auguste Mariette in 1871, and its detailed research was described by William Fletcher's Petrie, a real famous early archaeologist, in 1892. The body of it is, however, all built of bricks throughout, and it's now only about 6.6 meters high, after most of the gravel top is gone now. It'll be seen on the plan that it was the first symmetrical 52 meters long and 33 meters wide, with a central pit, 2 false doors on the east face, and a second pit nearby behind the north door. Inside the innermost southwest corner is a division in the mass of brickwork, which can hardly have any meaning in terms of design, as it runs too close to the chamber. Afterwards, it was enlarged on the south and west, and a large addition was made to the north, marked as the annex, and the decoration of the tomb walls were badly damaged, and only partial drawings were identified as presented by Petrie whenever he researched into it and documented it all. Now, the most famous find of Mariette's workmen was the statue of Rahotep and his wife Nofret, which are shown there together. Simultaneously exhibited in the Egyptian Museum of Cairo. At the head of statues are hieroglyphic records of Rahotep's functions. Rahotep's titles were inscribed on a magnificent statue of him, with a statue of his wife was excavated from his mastabas at Maidum, again, as I said, in 1871 by Auguste Mariette. These describe him as the high priest of Ra at Heliopolis, with the added title, unique to Heliopolis, Ra's town of greatest of seers, director of expeditions and supervisor of works. So there were a lot of expeditions of people going places and things that really aren't tabulated as much as, well, when you get into real deep, you'll find that there's a lot more of it. He was also given the title to high nobility of the time, the son of the king, begotten of his body. Nofret and Rahotep had 3 sons, Jedi, Itu, and Neferkaru, and 3 daughters, Meret, Ninjib, and Sethtet, as they are depicted in Rahotep's tomb. Overall, the frescoes provide a picture of the Grand Master's life before the age of 26 centuries BC. A similar image is also provided by the tomb of Rahotep's brother Nefermat in the Minoan tomb called Tomb 16, or Mastaba 16. Now, Nofret and Rahotep's statue at the Egyptian Museum in Cairo looks like this. I've already shown it. And you can look at a picture that's a close-up of Nofret. And then here's where they have taken AI and they said, make this come to life. This is something that looks like a doll or a statue. And now they can do that with AI to where they can make it basically come to life. And it does look remarkably like her. There's also a fresco in the niche of the southern wall of the tomb of Rahotep at Minoan number 6. It's still in decent shape, and once they tabulated it, this is the way it looks. You can see these guys that have gone fishing here carrying this huge fish, and they're more sunburnt or more tanned than the other depictions that are shown there, and that makes sense because some of these craftsmen are doing their work indoors and not getting so tanned and so on. It's a Caucasian artistic expression. As I said, you can find this all over the Near and Middle East, up through Europe, Etruscans, all kinds of places. And it really wasn't during just this time. It carries on all the way through the Renaissance and so on. You can look at a lot of pictures through the Renaissance, and it'll show these paler women and, more tanned men. And that's because women were able to stay at home more and not be out in the sun toiling all the time. And that's because of the advance of agriculture and all the things that goes along with it. Then there are certain places became an idea that men would start powdering and women would powder too, showing you how pale they could be. Even if they had a tan, they would try to be more pale. But that's way later, not at this time here. Here's Rahotep's slab stele at the British Museum. The stele of Rahotep's mastabas, which is on display at the Louvre. So this was an important person in the time of the pyramids. He was a prince of the pharaoh just before and brother of Cheops himself, Khufu. And Khufu's granddaughter is shown as a redhead on the tomb walls, as I've shown before. Now, Zahiwas noted on possible Huni as being his father, but there's still no evidence for that exists. In fact, by the naming and the way it puts out, and they show on the walls who they are, most people have made the connection that this is the brother of Cheops. The Ashur was chosen mainly for its proximity to the Nile and its easy transport of building materials for Sneferu's pyramids and construction. And of course, that's what I said is the father of Rahotep here himself. He was the eldest son of Sneferu, a vizier and keeper of the royal seat. But being the eldest son, you'd think that he would become the pharaoh. Well, no, actually who became the pharaoh is Cheops. And there's reason for that, such as his wife Nofret is not necessarily got as close a connection to the ancients as does Cheops' wife. And that's something that the Sumerians did too. And so this type of thing is something that's well known, where they would almost have a number base on how close you were. And so whenever the dynasties ended, there would be somebody chosen. Well, how do they choose it? They use these numbers designating on who they were and how close they were at the time. And of course, they become a god. Anyhow, there's a lot of references if you go to Wiki and other places on this. But Flinders Petrie at the Maidoom in London in 1892, Herman Reinke, Henry Gauthier, Mark Lehner, which is a more contemporary guy from our modern time, August Mariette, as we talked about, Gaston Mosier wrote a book on Les Mistables of Ancient Empire, guide and library editing. Petrie, of course, and quite a few more. In fact, one place is the Oxford History of Ancient Egypt by Ian Shaw, circa around 2000. And his depiction and what they talk about on him is on page 129. So, Rahotep and Nofret, Egyptian nobility of the 4th dynasty. Now maybe I'll finish off by showing you a few pictures of reserve heads, which were pretty much not the most nobility of nobility, just important people, showing you these lifelike sculptures that they had of these people, which in our way we're led to think that they just had something kind of that looked alright or pretty good, but it's weird, and people have made comments about it. Whenever you look at the earliest of dynasties, you're finding things that look more realistic, and these crystal blue eyes that they had that are surrounded by the sclera, the white of the eye, was a special stone that they had found that had little pink veins in it, and being white, of course, and they used little slivers of it to make the whites of the eyes so it looked real. And then with this see-through clear blue lens for an eye that they used, they would put a dot behind it, and it literally looked like these things followed you around the room. So much more real. It's really quite an amazing thing, but something they don't want to talk about too much, because that blue-eyed nobility that were running Egypt in the earliest of dynasties all the way through is not something that's real common in Egypt today. And of course, Sahiwas wants to say that the modern Egyptians were the ancient Egyptians. And it's funny that every find that they have shows that, well, that's not necessarily true. I mean, the population of the million-man necropolis shows you that it was separated by hair color, with blondes in one area, redheads in another, brown and dark-haired people in another area. Well, if you look at Egypt today, there are still some blondes and a lot of blue-eyed people, but nowhere near the amount that were there in the ancient of times, and that appears to have changed all about the time of around the post-Roman periods. So things really changed a lot. Anyhow, let me know if you know anything extra that you can add to it. I can't fathom what I was going to say extra to it here, but here's Rahotep and Nofret. Brother to Cheops himself. Now, we'll never find the other statues to the other people, and I believe somebody probably has them in their collection someplace, and you'll never ever hear about it. And one wonders what's come missing of all these things, and if their mummies were found at one time and just sold off for $5 or whatever they used to sell them for back in the day, just to get rid of them. Kind of sad to think about. Anyhow, we'll get on to another one. Y'all enjoy. Like, Share and subscribe if you aren't already. Peace.